Hello, good afternoon and welcome to P2P Live. So 12:30 on Friday is our regular slot where we have our job and employment market update. And we have a special P2P Live today and I'm very pleased to be hosting specifically around International Women's Day. So as we draw to the end of the week where we've been marking International Women's Day, we thought that we would have that as a bit of a theme for today. So thank you for joining us. We're live on Facebook, YouTube and LinkedIn. So if you are watching along live and you'd like to comment or add to the conversation or ask a question, please do that. I'll do my best to track if comments and questions come in and get to them as they come up. I did want to also acknowledge that I'm coming to you today from Darug and Gundagara people land. I'm in the beautiful Blue Mountains and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So thank you for joining us. I should tell you my name. My name is Catherine Kennedy and I'm the Managing Director of People to People here in New South Wales. Mark Smith, who's ordinarily the host, is enjoying a much deserved break. He's off to the Adelaide Fringe Festival. So if you're watching, Mark, hopefully you have a great weekend over there. In terms of what we're going to do today, so we'll have our regular numbers section, specifically around the gender pay gap. So there's some interesting data that's been released this week that I will take you through. We've also got, as always, we've got jobs that need to be filled urgently. So I think we've got 3 positions that the team is furiously looking to find candidates to start as early as Monday. So share that with you. And then we're going to, speaking of Adelaide, we're going to go across to South Australia and catch up with Peta Seaman, who's our director in South Australia, and talk to her about the topic of International Women's Day this year, which is breaking the bias. So that's the plan of attack for today. It is finally, there's some sun in Sydney. So for anybody, and hopefully there's sun in Queensland as well. I know there's been a lot of people impacted by the floods. So just wanted to say to anyone who's embarking on that big cleanup that we're thinking of you and we wish you well. And hopefully you're getting to enjoy some sunshine finally. But let's get into it with our regular numbers section. Great. So look, this is some data that's been released through the week from the Workplace Gender Equality Agency, and it's about the gender pay gap. So what you can see on the screen there is that on average across Australia, women earn $255.30 less than men every week. So it's nearly 14% less than men. In terms of the different locations, Western Australia, there's the greatest discrepancy, 21.2%. And then in South Australia, it's 7.4%. And there's some commentary, and I'll make sure that we put a link to where this information's come from. There is some commentary around why that is the case, suspecting that it might reflect the type of work that's dominant in those industries. So there's a lot of public sector work in South Australia traditionally. Western Australia, for example, tends to be mining, construction focused. But yeah, overall, it is nearly 14% difference. And that's much improved from years gone by, but there's still a lot of work to be done there as well. So and in terms of the different professions, professional, scientific and technical services, nearly 25% gap, I guess, in terms of what men and women are being paid. So quite alarming to see that improvements, as I said, but that's fairly stark. And as the mother of 2 little girls, I'd like to see this continue to decline and decline and decline until we reach equality. If you go to the next slide there, please, Jacob. So this gives a wider or a longer perspective historically. So back to May 2011. So really looking at the last 10 years or so. And the gender pay gap in Australia has hovered between 13 and about 19%. So, but the pleasing thing when you look at this graph is that there is a nice, consistent downward trend. There were a few unusual things that happened throughout COVID in terms of part-time work and the impact that had, and the commentary, which you can read if you click through the links that we'll provide, actually says that women took the greatest hit, but have also had the greatest resurgence, which is why there's been a decline or a shortening of this gap more recently. But that just gives you some historical perspective as well. If you jump to the next slide, please, Jacob. So this breaks down the different locations, and it was interesting to see this in that it's quite a mixed bag, comparing November 2020 to November 2021. So looking at those 2 points in time, and there are some states that have really closed that gap. So South Australia, New South Wales, Northern Territory and Western Australia. But then equally in some states, that gap has actually widened. So in Queensland and Victoria, also in the ACT and in Tasmania. So once again, what I mentioned before is that might be a reflection of some of the work or the dominant industries in those sectors. And I think there has been some impact of obviously November 2020 was right in the depths of the pandemic, and what impact that had particularly on women and women's earning potential and the number of hours that they were working compared to 2021. So yeah, a bit of a mixed bag there, but good to see in some of the locations that there are improvements that are being made. And I think we've got just one final slide. So this breaks it down, the gender pay gap, by role function and also by some of the job categories. So the top there you can see in the sort of orange colour, that has leadership roles essentially. So key management personnel, 23% of 23.1% men are paid more than women in those sorts of roles. Other executives, 22.5%, senior managers, 17.7%, and other managers, 19.8%. So between 20 to 23, 24% difference for people in senior positions. And this is full-time, part-time, and casual. So it's putting all of those employee groups into one. And so there's lots of potential explanations. And I understand these things are complex and nuanced, but the data is that men and women are not earning the same. So that's something that I think definitely needs to continue to be a conversation that we're having. The lighter colour, so the yellow sort of colour, that breaks it down by the type of role function that people are in. Not surprisingly, technicians and trade workers, that's where there's the greatest variance. One of the comments from the commentary where I found this data, it's that sometimes that might be bonuses or things that are related to completion of a project, and that tends to be a more male-dominated industry. And then the more traditional female-dominated industries like clerical and community and personal services work, that gap is not as wide, but still there is still a variance. So I thought that data was interesting just for us all to have a little bit of perspective about what the reality is right now. I think there's been big improvements, and I have to say I'm exceptionally proud to work in and lead a business that has very strong female representation. In fact, 80% of our directors and owners and senior leaders are women. So, and there's lots of organisations that are doing that, but yeah, there's still some work to be done. So that's really the end of it for our numbers section. If you do, and there's a lot to digest there, and there's, yeah, like I said, there's nuance and there's complexity to that data. So I'll make sure that a link to all of that information is put into the, I was going to say the show notes because I listened to too many podcasts, put into the comments, and you can jump in and do your own research if you would like to. We might move now to the jobs that we've got available, because we've got lots of jobs that we need to have filled for Monday. Okay, so what you can see on your screen here, and we'll go through each of them, these are all jobs that are to start ASAP, and by ASAP we mean Monday. So in Victoria, Chelsea's looking at this role. It's a transport operator, 3-month temp assignment. There's particular experience needed across land, air and sea, and regulations around international transport. So if you're interested and if you can start quickly, or you know someone who can start quickly, looking at $43 an hour for that role, please reach out to Chelsea. Her contact info is there. If we go to the next slide, Jacob, so I know Georgia up in Brisbane is furiously working to fill this position, once again for as early as a Monday start, $50 to $59 per hour. You're looking at, you would be responsible for admin support to the team, ideally looking for some workers' comp or dispute resolution experience as well. Georgia's details are there, and I'm sure she would gladly take your call if you have got relevant experience or can refer someone with relevant experience. And then the last of the very urgent jobs that the team's working across, which is here in Sydney, is this site administrator role. So I know this client, it's a client that we do a lot of work with. They're a very well-known name in the construction industry, and they're exceptionally busy at the moment, and they need a site administrator. Indeed, they might need more than one site administrator, I would suspect, to start very quickly working on site, as the name would suggest. So Alia is the person who's managing that, and all of the contact details are there. We'll make sure that there's links to the advertisements, but given the urgency, given that we want them to be filled really and for a Monday start, either reach out directly to the people whose names and details are on screen there, or you can also, if you're on a train or a bus, or you're somewhere where you just think, hey, is this going to be easier to do a quick video, we'll put a link to Vply in the comments. And so that's a platform that you can, instead of sending a CV, you just do a quick video application. So that is a solution that might work for you, particularly given the fast turnaround time and the immediacy of these particular vacancies. So yeah, they're the jobs that are available. We've got lots of other jobs as well. I know the team across the board is very, very busy. So please, if those roles are not appropriate, but you're looking for work, jump on our website and you'll be able to see all of the other positions that are available as well. So now we're going to head over to South Australia. We're going to chat to Peta Seaman around the International Women's Day theme. But to get us there, we will show you a video that was done this week marking International Women's Day for the People to People team.
My name is Liz Punchin. I'm a Director and Acting Branch Manager for People to People Melbourne.
My name is Peter and I'm the Director of People to People in South Australia.
I'm Lisa Johnson. I'm the Shared Services Manager with People to People, and I've worked with People to People for 15 years.
Frustratingly, we do still see bias in some recruitment processes, certainly not all. I feel like businesses have come a long way in this area. There's still a way to go though. So not only with gender, but also age, ethnicity, disability, other cultural backgrounds. So it is something that we do need to be aware of as recruiters.
I personally don't feel that I encounter bias in my workplace. However, as a recruiter, I see a lot of unconscious bias against women. One that I often think about is the ability to offer positions on a part-time basis. Whilst over the past 2 years, we have seen flexibility increase across many businesses, part-time work has not increased. And I speak with many women who are struggling to find work that can support the family and work balance.
Well, I'm incredibly lucky because I don't think that I experience any bias. I have in my past, not with People to People, but with other employers, but now I don't feel that I do. However, I'm very much aware that I'm not the norm and that I'm very lucky, because most women will be experiencing bias and discrimination in the workforce right now.
I feel fortunate to be surrounded by very impressive women, not only in my professional but personal life as well. But one that does stand out is our Managing Director, Erin Devlin. She runs this business. She is a mother, an author, an advocate for our industry through the RCSA, and she does it all effortlessly. So Erin is very impressive and inspiring.
I feel very privileged to have many women in my life that inspire me daily, and today I'd like to talk about my grandmother. She's 89 years old this year, and she's built a strong career as a dressmaker whilst raising 3 children and running a farm alongside my grandfather. Today she still makes clothes, knits beanies and blankets and donates them to charity. I couldn't have a better role model to look up to.
In terms of a woman that I really admire and look up to, I actually really admire young women. Women of my generation, being Generation X, we entered the workforce at a time where it was just accepted, right? So it was acceptable for there to be rude jokes, for people to touch you. It was just accepted that you would be paid less. And the young women of today have said enough is enough. And it's not just young women, I know that, but I just really admire the courage and bravery.
Conversation. I truly believe the only way we can keep fighting the bias is to continue the conversation.
One thing that would make a difference in fighting bias is to acknowledge and communicate when you do recognise that there is bias in whether it be recruitment processes or anything else within your professional and personal life. Do acknowledge and communicate when you can see that there is bias and be part of that change.
Great. Well, we're joined now by Peta Seaman, who you would have seen in that video just then. Hello, Peter.
Hi, Kath.
How are you going?
Good,
Some
thank
impressive
you.
women that we work with. I was just sitting there watching that thinking, God, we work with some really very impressive and really people who I really admire. So I think we're both fortunate to be in that position. But as you know, and I know Peter, for those watching, Peter did facilitate an internal discussion or a panel that we had through the week around International Women's Day. And the theme this year is Break the Bias. So particularly in the recruitment process and in the recruitment sector, Peter, what do you see in terms of, or is there a particular experience that you've had where there's been bias because of your gender or because of gender more generally?
Sure. So this is a topic that I could talk about for a long time, as we still see many types of bias towards women today. But one in particular that I think we still see towards women in the recruitment process is the assumption of marriage, children, and career breaks. I personally have 2 children, and I've experienced the assumption when I got married that I would have children, take 1 to 2 years off work, and even reduce to part-time, and that this would interrupt my career and ability to continue to grow and develop, or even to become a leader. So I think that's still very prevalent today. But I think personally, I know that I'm in a very unique situation where I've been able to have 2 children and a career, and this really wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for the support of my employer and my family. It's really difficult to raise a family, and the load really should be shared across both parents and jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you and I are in similar situations. We've got 2 young children of similar ages. So I do think that in terms of bias, there's also a bias that assumes that women need to and should take that primary caregiver role, and that's a choice for some people, and I absolutely respect that, and that's a personal family decision, of course. But I think it would be very rare. Like, I've had situations where someone has said to me quite innocently, but who's looking after the children if you have this job and you work and you leave the house very early? And I doubt they would have ever said that to my children's father or to any father. You know, there wouldn't be sort of an assumption that means the kids must be not cared for somehow. So I think, that bias that relates to sort of, I guess, mental load and family responsibility is definitely there, alive and well. Is there anything that you would suggest, so just to thinking practically around what we can do or what people can do or think about to break that bias in the workplace or to address that in the workplace? Anything that you would comment on or suggest?
Yeah, sure. So I think we have to continue to talk about it. That's the number one. So we have to talk about it. It's uncomfortable at times, but we need to be able to challenge gender stereotypes, discrimination and bias. And we need to make more awareness to help others change their mindset. So I think we need to be able to help others to get to that point too. So I know personally for me, I will continue the conversation and I'll try to influence others and beliefs and actions in both my workplace and my social circle.
Yeah, absolutely. And if there is enough of us, and if it's a conversation, which I have to say I'm really pleased that even over just the last few years, and it shouldn't be just a conversation for this week or for one day, it should be a conversation that continues all the time. But I think the spotlight that's been put on International Women's Day and the spotlight that's been put on this conversation is really encouraging. And so hopefully we can keep that momentum so that when my daughters are our age and sitting in this sort of position, they're not having to have the same conversation. That's my hope. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Peter. And thank you so much for the video that you did through the week as well and the panel that you ran as well.
Thank you.
Thanks. So we're pretty much done for today. I was told I needed to be spot on time, and I want to make sure that I meet my obligations there. So the final thing is just to give the results from our Twitter poll last week. So we run a poll every week. We put it out to the Twitterverse. So the question last week, as you can see on screen, is: do you think the Great Resignation is a real thing? And it seems like if you went to a barbecue and you asked someone, it's about a 50-50 shot of what they would think. So 53.5 says yes, 46.5 says no, which says it's a, I guess, fairly hotly debated concept as to whether there is such a thing as a Great Resignation at play. The question this week which relates to obviously what we've been discussing, is have you ever experienced bias in your workplace? And so it's not just gender bias that we're talking about, it's bias in, and there's Peter touched on a couple of different ways that bias can present itself. So please jump on to Twitter. We'll share that link in the comments along with all of the other links that I've said will be shared. They may have already gone. I just can't seem to see the comments, strangely. So apologies if I've missed any questions or comments as they've come through. But thank you very much for your for watching and for joining us. Hopefully that's been helpful for you. We'll be back at 12:30 next Friday, and I hope you get out and have some sunshine and have a nice weekend. Thanks for watching.